Hi, this is National Master Dan Heisman, and we're here with another video to help you improve your chess game. I kind of picked out a semi-random game from my library to take a look at. I wanted to talk about quiescence errors today, and I noticed the word quiescence was in the title in the library. And I picked a position that I haven't seen in several years, so I don't remember what the issues were. So actually, I'm looking at it kind of new for the first time. And I wanted to do that with you to try to discuss some of the issues of quiescence and good analysis and things like that. All right, so it's white to play. So the first thing you do when you're in a position like this is you count the material. All right, so white has a queen, 2 rooks, a knight, and 5 pawns. Black has a queen, 2 rooks, a bishop, and a knight, and 2 pawns. So black has a bishop for 3 pawns. Normally, a bishop for 3 pawns is a monster advantage at most points. But here the black king is fairly exposed, and it's white's move, and whose move it is makes a big difference in a position like this. In fact, if it was black's move, he could probably just take off the rook on g6, so we can assume black's last move was something like queen to h7. All right, so let's analyze the position a little bit and see what we can find. Suppose we're a really weak player, and we analyze in this position, and we say, all right, what can I do? Well, I can play a check. Well, how many checks do we have? We have 1 check, rook to g8. Well, that looks really, really promising. Rook to g8 check, and he has no moves. He can't go to e7, f7, g7 because they're guarded by the knight and the pawn. And therefore, he has to take his queen and take the rook. And we go, all right, we win his queen, hit clock. Okay, what's wrong with that? Well, first of all, when you see a good move, look for a better one, but even more important is when you see a good move, make sure it's really as good as you think it is. All right, so let's look a little bit deeper. Yes, after rook g8 check, he does have to play queen takes g8, and if we want to win the queen, we're going to have to play knight takes g8, and then black could probably play king takes g8. But let's count the material there. In that position, black has a rook, a bishop, and a knight for a queen and 3 pawns. Well, the queen and 3 pawns may sound like it's worth more than a rook, a bishop, and a knight, but when you have all those extra pieces that are worth more than the queen, they can go around the board winning things. So that's actually not a very good material balance for white. But let's look further and see if we can do something. Well, we'd love to play the queen to the g file and check, and then play something like queen g7 check and try to mate him, but the knight is guarding g7. And also, if we check on the g file, black has some cute moves where he can put something in the way, and we really can't take it. So, for instance, if we play rook g8 check, queen takes g8, knight takes g8, king takes g8, queen to g1 check, black could play something like, I don't know, even rook to g3. And we can't take the rook with the queen because the knight's guarding it, and we can't take the rook with the pawn because the bishop takes the queen. If you're having trouble visualizing that, you can stop the video and take turns to visualize it, but when you're doing that, you want to practice visualizing as much as you can. So let me show the line, but you really don't want to move the pieces. You won't get better at analysis if you don't practice your visualization. And practice may not make perfect, but it will make you better. So I'm looking at rook takes, queen takes is forced, knight takes, king takes. And now I'm trying to get my queen in here with a safe check. And I looked at this check, and now I'm looking at a move like this. So if the pawn takes the rook, then the bishop will take the queen. If the queen takes the rook, then the knight will take the queen. But where can the queen go? Well, I guess the queen can just go out of the way and go here, but then black will save the rook, and the queen's not making any progress here. Better would be to play queen to g2 check. Now if the rook goes in the way, we can take it with the pawn. If he puts the knight in the way, we could probably take it with the pawn too. But as I said, the knight's guarding the mate, so black could just move his king out of the way and play something like, I don't know, king to f8 going toward the middle. And now the problem is if white plays something like queen to g6 hitting the knight. All right, so we could get this far. This would be a very interesting position. Does black have any ways of sacrificing and getting a back rank mate here? Not as long as the rook's here. So in this position, black has to save the knight. If he moves the knight, then white's starting to get some real play. Let's see, where could he safely move the knight? If he takes the pawn, then white has rook takes, bishop takes, queen takes. Now this is the kind of position, if I got this far, I would assume I'm just winning, because even though he has back rank mates, both his rooks are loose, and I should be able to pick up a rook with check. For instance, if he plays to the g file, I can play queen here, check, and take this rook. When he gets out of check, I take the rook, and if he goes to back rank mate me, I put the queen in the way, and if he takes, I take with the king, and I have a winning endgame. On the other hand, if he goes to the e file, can I keep checking him and pick up this rook the same way? Is there some squares I can go to that would do that? It's not clear, but it does look promising. I could probably start with something like either queen g6 check or queen h8 check. The worst that can happen to white here is that he would get a draw. You know, he can always create luft with his pawns and not get back rank mated, but it looks like he has at least a perpetual check. So that's an interesting line. Okay, but does that mean we should play it just because that line looks okay for white? Well, no, because just because we're winning his queen doesn't necessarily make it the best move. So we really need to look for, you know, we're trying to not find a good move. We're trying to find the best move we can. If rook g8 check just won the game, if he would just resign because we're winning his queen, well then rook g8, we don't need to look for a better move. When you see a good move, look for a better one. But if you see one that just wins the game, well then looking for a better one is a big waste of time. But rook g8 check does not win the game. It's just a promising check. Let's look for other moves. What else could we do? Well, we could play the cute move queen to b7. You might say, Dan, you're out of your mind. He'll just take the queen. Well, if that would be a quiescence error, because if we play queen to b7 and he plays queen takes b7, then rook g8 is checkmate. So queen b7 is actually a candidate move. Does that mean it's a good move just because it's tricky? Well, again, that would be a quiescence error. If we stop right there and say queen b7, queen takes b7, rook g8 mate, okay, let's play it. Well, but what if black does something else? What if black says, all right, I won't take your queen, I'll take your rook. So after queen b7, he plays queen takes g6. And now, what does white have? He just lost a rook. Queen to f7 is not mate. Queen on b7 could play queen takes b4 check. Let's take a look at that. So queen b7, queen takes g6, queen b4 check. He can't put the rook in the way. He can't put the bishop in the way. Queen can't legally go in the way. He can't play g8, g7, f7, or e7. So he has to play king e8. All right, so that's at least interesting. Then we have f7 check. f7 check. What would he play? All right, so queen b7, queen takes g6, queen takes b4 check, king to e8, f7 check. If he plays queen takes f7, we play knight takes f7, and now we are up material, and we're pretty much winning there. And we're threatening all kinds of stuff. We could even play, well, I don't want to play rook takes f7, even though rook takes f7, rook e1 check, queen takes e1. I probably don't want to do that. All right, so we're still looking at queen b7, queen takes g6, f7 check, queen takes b4 check, king e8, f7 check. So now he would have to play something like, let's say, king to d7, but then I have queen takes d4 check, and then I win the rook on e3 also. That looks really, 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 really good. All right, let's do that again. Queen b7. If we stop at queen takes b7, we're missing rook g8 check. But if we stop at queen takes g6, then that's a quiescence error, because queen takes b4 check looks like it might be winning. King e8, f7 check. If he takes with the queen, I win his queen. If he plays king to d7, then I have queen takes d4 check, winning the rook on e3. All right, so let's take a look. Let me show you, for those of you having trouble visualizing. Queen b7. If he plays queen takes b7, I have rook to g8 checkmate. If he plays queen takes g6, then I have queen takes b4 check. He can't go here, he can't go here, he can't go here. Putting the bishop in the way doesn't really help him much. I just take check and win the rook anyway. So king e8 check. If he takes with the queen and I take with the knight, that looks really, really dangerous for him. His king is even more exposed than before. My queen is on a rampage here. I think he probably would have to take it, because if he plays here, then I play check here, and now when he moves the king, I can even just take the rook, and I'm guarding the knight, and now I'm just up 3 pawns, and his king is exposed, and I'm threatening to get a queen in some lines. So that's good too. Can we stop here and say queen b7 wins? No, we can't, because what if he plays something in the way, like rook to d7? All right, so now we have to analyze that. Queen b7, rook d7. Oh, but then I have queen to c8 check. And can he put the rook on e8? Maybe he can. Rook on e8. Do I have rook g8 check? No. All right, so we have to analyze this. Queen to b7, rook to d7. If we can beat this, we could probably beat almost anything then, because we're threatening to take off his queen, and he doesn't have a lot of good moves. Queen to h8 loses to queen f7 mate. All right, so queen b7, rook d7. We have to analyze this move. We still have queen takes b4 check, which is really, really strong. He has to play king e8, and we still have, well, we don't have a f7 check yet, but maybe, can we, boy, we have all kinds of good things happening. Queen takes b4 check. If he plays king e8, f7 check doesn't probably work because of rook takes, although on rook takes, he's unguarding his bishop again. So there's lots of good possibilities there. Queen b7, rook d7, queen takes b4 check, king to e8. Boy, that looks promising. So what are all white's candidate moves? He can play f7 check, probably not the best move, but not bad. He can now play rook to g8 check, winning the queen because the king's not guarding that square anymore. Oh, well, that's the end of the game then. Queen b7, rook d7, queen takes b4 check, king to e8, rook to g8 check, queen takes g8, knight takes g8, and he can't recapture because the king's on the wrong square, and I'm holding the back rank mates. So it looks like queen b7 is starting to win. All right, when you see a win, you just want to go over it a million times and make sure it really wins, because you don't want to be embarrassed and play queen b7, and then next thing you know, he plays bishop takes f6 and mates you on the back rank or something. So that's true. We could also look at a move like just play queen to g2 instead of queen to b7. Now, in a real game, you wouldn't do this. If you think queen b7 wins, you just keep analyzing it. But queen to g2, we're now threatening rook g8 check, queen takes g8 mate. How would he stop that? Well, if he puts something in the way, if he plays knight to g3, I assume we can just play rook takes g3, or even pawn. We could just, well, yeah, rook takes g3. We don't want to play pawn takes g3 because he takes the rook with the queen. So rook takes g3, and then if he plays queen takes h6, do we have something like rook g8 check? We do. We also have rook takes e3, bishop takes e3, and then queen g7 check, king e8, queen e7 mate. All right, so queen g2, knight g3, rook g3. If queen takes h6, rook queen g7 is not mate because his queen's guarding that square. All right, so queen g2, knight g3. If he doesn't play knight g3, I think rook g8 check is pretty strong. I'm not sure how he stops it. Queen to g2. He could also play rook to g3, because if I play pawn takes rook, he can play queen takes rook. Queen to g2, knight g3, rook takes g3. He could also play rook takes g3, and then after queen takes g3, he could play queen takes h6. And white's looking okay there, but black still has a bishop for the 3 pawns. So if you look at queen g2 and you don't look at him sacrificing on g3, that's a quiescence error again. So let's say he tries to stop the mate some other way. So let's say queen g2, and he tries, I don't know, king to e8. But if he plays king to e8, we have f7 check. And then if he plays king to e7, we have like queen to, probably queen to b7 check, or maybe knight f5 check. These all look pretty good. After queen g2, I don't see how he stops the mate on g8 other than putting something on g3. If he moves the king, it looks pretty hopeless. If he checks with rook e1 check, we just take it with the rook, and that doesn't help him. So queen g2, I think he has to put something on g3. Knight to g3. And now he's threatening to take our rook. In fact, he's threatening to take both rooks. And so, well, he's not probably threatening to take the rook on f1 because the rook g8 check is mate after queen takes, queen takes. But he is threatening to take the rook on g6 with queen takes g6. So what am I talking about? We're talking about, let's again, for those of you that have trouble visualizing, queen here threatening rook mate. And now he could play knight here, interfering with this line. Now, if you stop here and say he can't do that, I'd take him with a pawn, then you're overlooking the fact that he interfered with my queen guarding my rook, and he could play queen takes here, and now he's up a whole rook, and white's probably dead lost in this position, I would guess. So you can't do that. You can't just take the knight. But if you overlook moves like this, because the pawn can just take the knight, that's called a quiescence error. Why? Because you're saying, oh, he can't go there because he takes with the pawn, but you're overlooking that it's not quiet. There's further checks, captures, and threats that would change your evaluation, and you would see that that's a good defense. So therefore, after knight to g3, then it looks like if we take with the rook, then now we've got our piece back and we're up 3 pawns, but our knight is hanging. So he could either trade rooks and then take the knight, or just take the knight right away. It's probably better to trade rooks first. We could connect our pawns by taking with a pawn, but then he's attacking this pawn twice after he takes the knight. If we take with the queen and he takes the knight, I don't have this mate anymore. Do I have a move like queen here hitting the rook? No, I don't. He can, well, he can't take with the bishop because then the sneaky pin, the bishop's pinned, and I could take the rook. All right, well, this is a little bit cute. What would he do here? He can't guard the rook with the bishop or the queens because of the sneaky pin. I guess he could try rook to e8 to stop queen e7 check. And white has 3 pawns for the bishop, but things aren't looking that good. All right, so if you think that rook g8 check wins the game, that is probably just a quiescence error. We have much better moves than rook to g8. Queen to g2, if you think that just wins the game because he can't stop rook g8 and mate in 2, then that's kind of a quiescence error because you're missing the fact that he could put the knight in the way, and then it's not so easy. If you're not looking at queen b7 at all, because he can just take your queen and you lose the queen, well, that's clearly a quiescence error. Because if he takes the queen, then rook g8 is checkmate. So the queen is actually safe there. So that means we have to investigate this further. Well, we already saw what different things he could do. We're threatening to take off his queen. If he plays something like knight takes f6, the knight is pinned to the king, so it's not really guarding the queen. I could just take his queen. And I guess he could play rook checks here now to give up the rook to get the queen. We could look at this. This is kind of cute. Rook takes here, and then knight takes queen. But then I have the rook checks again, and it's checkmate. Cute. All right, so it looks like after queen to b7, he can't play knight takes f6 because of queen takes h7. He can't take, but he could deflect my rook. And now if he takes, I mate him.
Checkmate.
Okay, cute. If I play queen to b7, obviously we've already seen he can't take it. If he takes the rook, then we have this check. And this is a killer check. Because he can't play king here, he can't play king here, he can't play king here. Throwing away the bishop to try to get more things that can put in the way really doesn't help him. Throwing the rook in the way doesn't help him. So king here. And now I can play pawn check. All right, he can't play king f8. It's illegal. He can't play king e7. It's illegal, so he has to play king d7 or queen takes f7. But now when I win the queen, now I'm getting an awful lot for the queen here, because I'm getting the queen for just basically the rook and this pawn. So now when I play knight takes, now if we count the material, I've got a queen and 3 pawns for a rook and a bishop. Plus his king is way, way, way more exposed. This is like, looks like a killer line for me, and his knight is not all that wonderful here. So this looks like white's just winning easily here. All right, but on queen to b7, what else could he do? I'm threatening to take his queen. If he puts the knight in the way, I think I have a mate now. If he moves the queen back here, I have a mate.
Checkmate.
We're looking for all the ways he can save his queen. So the final line, we already saw king here. Sorry, we saw rook here is the final line. All right, so we looked at queen takes rook. We saw queen takes pawn check, king e8, pawn checks. And if he plays king here, I have queen takes check. And when he moves out of the way, I can even take the rook and guard the knight. And I'm up 4 pawns. So that should be winning. I think I'm in good shape here. All right, let's go back again. Queen here, rook here. We haven't looked at that. And then queen takes pawn check. We haven't looked at that recently. We looked at it earlier. And we said he can't play there, he can't play there, he can't play there, he can't put anything in the way. So he plays king here. Now what? Well, now if worst comes to worst, we can play rook g8 check. And now since the king can't take the knight at the end, when he takes with the queen, which is his only legal move, and we take with the knight, again we have instead of having a queen for a rook and a bishop and a knight, we have a queen just for a rook and a bishop with all those extra pawns. And this should be pretty much winning just on material, if nothing else. So we're starting to settle on the fact that queen b7 is winning. Now, is that the only winning move for white? Maybe not, but it does look like it's winning. All right, so let's have Stockfish show us the top like 3 or 4 moves here. Okay, Mr. Stockfish. Now, I haven't seen Stockfish's analysis like before the video. It's probably been years, so I have no idea what he's going to say. I have no idea if queen b7 is the right move. For all I know, he likes rook checks and I missed something. Mr. Stockfish, let's see the top 3. Okay, so the lines we looked at are winning. Queen b7 is the best move. Queen g2 is winning. Rook g7 is winning. All right, so let's look at queen g2 and look at the analysis, because I thought what was winning, but I thought it was harder than queen b7, which it is, but it's still pretty easy at plus 9. So queen g2, and now putting something in the way is what you got to do. All right, I thought he would put the knight in the way. Stockfish says putting the rook in the way is a little better. Let's look at putting the knight in the way. And now I looked at rook takes g3, which I thought was winning, but it wasn't trivial. Stockfish says rook to g7 is even better. If rook takes, queen takes, and now if he takes the knight, we're down the bishop to 3 pawns. Stockfish says that queen to the 7th rank trick still works, hitting the rook. And now, if he tries to play rook to e8, I can pick up the bishop with a check, get all these double attacks here. And again, as we said earlier, he doesn't have these lines where he's guarding the bishop. You know, when he plays bishop takes, I just can play queen takes rook check. All right, so it's nice to know that this is kind of winning like I thought it was, but it's also nice to know that queen b7 is the best move. All right, so queen b7 is number 1. Is it the only winning move here? No, it's not. White has a very, very good position with the exposed black king. I'm just trying to talk about how do you avoid these quiescent errors. I mean, a lot of people, when I give them puzzles like this, they don't even look at queen b7 seriously, because they say, well, that move doesn't make any sense. He can just take the queen. And that's a quiescence error. Good players don't think that way. They think, if he takes the queen, am I doing anything? Well, yes, if he takes the queen, there's no queen guarding g8. And
checkmate. This
is checkmate. So already queen b7 starts to become a candidate move. But when you see moves like that and you reject them right away, you know, if it was a puzzle, then people go, oh, there's something here. Let's try to look for something tricky. But when you have these complicated positions, you're always trying to look and see what people can do. Same thing with queen g2. If you just say, well, black's just going to get mated with queen here, And if he puts things in the way, he's just giving you free pieces. Well, it's true, this line is winning for white, but it's not quite so easy, because on a move like knight g3, you're not just winning the knight, because he is disconnecting the queen from the rook, so it is a interference problem here. Does it save the game for black? No, of course not, it doesn't. But at least it gives him a defense where we can try to look at it and evaluate it and analyze it. So one of the ideas that I'm always trying to get across is that a lot of my students solve puzzles easily, but then when they see similar positions in a game, they make quiescence errors. So the more we talk about quiescence errors, what causes them, how to avoid them, how a good player thinks to avoid them. Good players don't say, oh, I can't do that, he'll just do this. They say, if he does that, is there anything further that would make me think that maybe I can do this? They try to look for some tactical justification. And if it's there, then they don't eliminate the move. All right, let me wrap this up. Please tell your friends about the channel, Dan Heisman Chess. You can subscribe. You can like the video. We'll see you next time. Bye.